It was a Friday morning in August, the kind of morning that belongs to summer. Warm air, quiet streets, the sound of a neighborhood still half asleep. A little girl left her house just after 9 o'clock. She was 8 years old. She knew where she was going. She had walked the same road many times before. The church was less than half a mile away. She never arrived. 2 months later, a man out for an early morning jog moved through the trees of Ridley Creek State Park and stopped. There, on the ground, covered with sticks and twigs, were the skeletal remains of a child. Her clothing had been folded neatly and placed beside her body. All of it, except one item. That one item had been hung from a nearby tree branch. Investigators who arrived at the scene that morning would later say it looked like a flag, as if someone had placed it there deliberately, as if someone wanted the spot to be found. Who does that? That question would go unanswered for 47 years. But tonight, we are going to sit with this case from the very beginning. Not the arrest, not the confession, not the courtroom. We are going to start with Gretchen. Because in nearly 50 years of coverage, newspaper reports, podcasts, true crime videos, very few people have stopped long enough to ask who she actually was, what her laugh sounded like, what kind of little girl walks out of her house on a Friday morning alone for the very first time and says goodbye to her family without knowing it will be the last time. Her family described her this way, and these are their words, not mine. If you met Gretchen, you were instantly her friend. This is her story, all of it, including the parts that don't end the way they should. Gretchen Eleanor Harrington was born on the 13th of June, 1967 in Marple Township, Pennsylvania. She was a Gemini, a summer child. She grew up in a Cape Cod-style home on Lawrence Road in Broomall, a leafy, quiet suburb about 6 miles west of the Philadelphia border. The kind of neighborhood where children played freeze tag in the street until dark, where screen doors banged open and shut all day long, where Darby Creek ran behind the houses and kids cooled off in it on hot afternoons without a second thought. It was, as one local official would later put it, any town USA, and Gretchen fit perfectly into it. She was the second of 4 daughters born to Harold Boyd Harrington and his wife Ina. Harold was a minister, a reverend in the Reformed Presbyterian Church of North America, a man of deep and quiet faith who had moved his family from western Pennsylvania to Marple Township in 1968 to serve a congregation there. Faith was not something the Harrington family practiced on Sundays and set aside during the week. It was woven into the ordinary fabric of their days, into the food on the table, the rhythm of the morning, the walk to church down the road. And Gretchen was a child of that world. Her sisters, Zoe, Anne, and Jessica, were her closest companions. They walked to Bible school together most mornings in summer. They shared a home that was, by every account, warm, anchored, full. That summer of 1975, the Harrington house was particularly full because a new baby had just arrived. The youngest sister, Jessica, had been born that same week. The household had that particular beautiful chaos that comes with a newborn, the disrupted routines, the extra hands needed, the gentle recalibration of a family expanding. It was the kind of week where small things shifted without anyone noticing. And one of those small things, ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of thing that happens in busy households every single day, was that Gretchen would walk to Bible school alone that Friday morning. Just that once. She was 8 years old, and she knew the way. The church was less than half a mile down Lawrence Road. She had walked it many times before, always with a sister beside her. There was no reason for concern. This was Broomall in 1975. Children walked everywhere. That was simply what children did. She left the house just after 9 o'clock, blonde pigtails in the warm August air. And that is the last image her family has of her, walking down Lawrence Road toward a church she never reached. I want to stop here for a moment because this is the part of Gretchen's story that tends to get compressed into a single sentence in most retellings. She was 8. She was walking to Bible school. She never arrived. And then the case begins. But Gretchen was not a case, not yet. She was a little girl who, by every account from the people who loved her and knew her, made an impression on every single person she met. Her family described her this way, and I think their words are worth reading slowly. If you met Gretchen, you were instantly her friend. She exuded kindness to all and was sweet and gentle. Even now, when people share their memories of her, the first thing they talk about is how amazing she was and still is. At just 8 years old, she had a lifelong impact on those who knew her. A lifelong impact at 8 years old. Think about what that means. Think about the kind of child who, 50 years after she last walked out of her front door, is still described by the people who knew her in the present tense. She was amazing. She is amazing. That is Gretchen. And that Friday morning, August 15th, 1975, she walked out of her home into a summer day that should have ended with her sitting at the dinner table with her family, tired from Bible school, asking about the baby. Ordinary. Instead, at approximately 9:20 in the morning, she was seen by neighbors walking alone on Lawrence Road. That is the last confirmed sighting of Gretchen Harrington alive. By 10:30, her father, Harold, stationed at the Reformed Presbyterian Church just down the road, waiting for the morning students to arrive, noticed that his daughter was not among them. He began searching Lawrence Road himself, walking it, calling her name. She was not there. At approximately 11:23 that morning, a phone call was placed to the Marple Township Police Department reporting Gretchen Harrington as missing. Within hours, hundreds of people were searching the surrounding area: neighbors, members of the congregation, volunteers, police. More than 2,000 leaflets were distributed. A 24-hour hotline was set up. It received hundreds of calls. Broomall had never seen anything like it. The community searched for Gretchen for 2 months. They did not find her. At 9:20 in the morning, on Friday, August the 15th, 1975, neighbors on Lawrence Road saw Gretchen Harrington walking alone. She was heading in the direction of Trinity Church Chapel, the Christian Reformed church about half a mile up the road, where Bible school began each morning. The routine was always the same: morning exercises at Trinity. Then at 10 o'clock, half the children would be transported by car to the Reformed Presbyterian Church next door to the Harrington home, where her father, Harold, served as pastor, for the second half of the day. Gretchen knew the walk. She had done it many times. But there's one detail about that morning that almost every other account leaves out. Something small that changes the entire weight of what comes next. Gretchen was walking alone not just because of the new baby. She was walking alone because her father had encouraged her to go. It was the last day of Bible school. Gretchen had not missed a single session. She had a perfect attendance record, and she didn't want to break it. Her sisters stayed home that morning because her mother needed help with newborn Jessica. Her father, understanding that Gretchen knew the route, that it was a familiar road, that this was Broomall in 1975, encouraged her to make the walk. He wanted her to keep her perfect record. She left the house. He went ahead to his church to prepare for the morning. And somewhere on that half mile of road, a road both of them knew by heart, Gretchen Harrington encountered a man she also knew, a man her family trusted, a man who was by every outward appearance one of them. His name was David Zandstra. He was 35 years old. He was the pastor of Trinity Church Chapel, the very church Gretchen was walking toward. He had served that congregation since 1969. He ran the morning exercises at Bible school. He was the one responsible for transporting the children from Trinity to the Reformed Presbyterian Church each morning at 10 o'clock. He was, in every practical sense, part of the fabric of the Harrington family's world. That morning, he was driving his green Rambler station wagon along Lawrence Road. He saw Gretchen walking alone. He stopped. He offered her a ride. She knew him. She got in. By 10:30 that morning, Gretchen had not arrived at her father's church. Harold Harrington waited. Then he walked Lawrence Road himself, looking for her. She was not there. He called Zandstra's wife, Margaret, at Trinity Chapel. Margaret noted something in passing. Her husband had returned to the church that morning, but not by vehicle. At 11:23, it was David Zandstra himself who placed the call to Marple Township Police Department reporting Gretchen Harrington as missing. The man who had taken her, who had driven her away from that road, away from her father's church, away from everything she knew, was the man who picked up the phone and reported her gone. He had been at her home. He knew her family. He had, according to investigators, presided over her funeral weeks later. And through all of it, the search, the community vigil, the 2,000 leaflets, the hundreds of calls to the hotline, he said nothing. Within hours of that phone call, hundreds of volunteers were combing the wooded areas surrounding Lawrence Road, searching Marple Township and the neighboring communities. Police distributed more than 2,000 leaflets bearing Gretchen's photograph. A 24-hour tip line received call after call. The fire chief told reporters 2 days in, "We haven't got a thing, not a thing." 2 months passed. On the morning of October the 14th, 1975, a man out for an early jog moved through the woods of Ridley Creek State Park, about 2.5 miles from the Harrington home, and there, in a clearing among the trees, he found her. Gretchen's skeletal remains had been covered with sticks and twigs. Her blouse, the one her mother had made for her by hand, was neatly folded beside her body, and her underwear had been hung from a nearby tree branch. Investigators who arrived at the scene said it looked like a flag, placed there deliberately, as if someone had wanted the spot to be found. No one would explain that detail for 47 years. Her death was ruled a homicide, blunt force trauma. 2 impacts to the right side of her skull had caused injuries the medical examiner described as life-threatening. She was 8 years old. The investigation began immediately and intensely. On August the 17th, 2 days after Gretchen's disappearance, police began formal interviews. Over the following weeks, they spoke with camp teachers, students, parents, and neighbors. Several crucial pieces of information emerged. Witnesses reported seeing a young girl near the church speaking with a driver of either a green station wagon or a 2-tone Cadillac. One witness, a delivery truck driver, said he had seen a girl he believed to be Gretchen standing near a vehicle parked on a steep hill leading up to Trinity Church. He had not thought it suspicious at the time. After hearing about the disappearance, he came forward. The descriptions of the vehicle pointed towards someone investigators already knew. David Zandstra was known to drive a green Rambler station wagon. He was brought in for questioning on August the 19th, then again on October the 30th, after Gretchen's remains had been found. In both interviews, he denied seeing Gretchen on the morning of August 15th. He told police he had been making his usual morning pickups, collecting children for Bible school, and had finished and returned to Trinity Chapel by 9:30. He said he did not know Gretchen was missing until Harold Harrington called him at 11 o'clock. But investigators noticed something.
In his description of Gretchen's clothing, the outfit she had been wearing that morning, Zandstra was extraordinarily specific. He described shorts in precise detail. Shorts that, according to investigators, he should never have seen, because Gretchen had never arrived at camp. It was the kind of detail that makes the stomach drop. A man who claimed he hadn't seen a child that morning describing with precision what she had been wearing. Police flagged it. They questioned him about it. He had no satisfactory answer.
But in 1975, with no forensic technology, no DNA evidence, and a case built entirely on witness accounts that could not be conclusively tied together, it was not enough to charge him. The lead detective on the case, Richard Mencken, pursued every available avenue. He received an anonymous letter with new information. He consulted a psychic who told him Gretchen was dead, and later described the location of her body in terms Mencken himself would call uncanny. He worked the case for years. But the leads ran dry. Zandstra left Broomall in 1976, moving first to Plano, Texas, where he established a new church, then to San Diego, California, then to Marietta, Georgia, where he eventually retired. Gretchen's case went cold. Detective Mencken died in June of 2020, still without an answer. 47 years passed. Gretchen's father, Harold, the man who had walked Lawrence Road calling her name, the man who had encouraged her to make that walk alone so she wouldn't break her perfect record, died in 2021 at the age of 94. He never saw justice for his daughter.
Now we come to the part of this story that I have been thinking about since I first encountered this case. Because what broke it open was not a forensic breakthrough. It was not new technology. It was not a deathbed confession or a tipster with a grudge. It was a woman who, as a 10-year-old girl in the summer of 1975, had written something down in her diary and had never forgotten what she wrote. We know her only as CI number 1, the confidential informant. We do not know her full name. What we do know is this. She had been best friends with one of Zandstra's daughters in the 1970s. She attended sleepovers at the Zandstra home regularly. She was part of that world, the same close-knit congregation, the same neighborhood, the same tight web of families who all knew each other. And during one of those sleepovers, when she was 10 years old, something happened. She woke in the night to find David Zandstra groping her. She told his daughter what had happened. His daughter's response, the response of a child who had been conditioned into silence, was simply that her father did that sometimes. The girl went home. She told her parents. She never slept over again. And she wrote it down, in her diary, in the careful, deliberate handwriting of a 10-year-old girl who understood, even then, that what had happened mattered, that it should be remembered. But that was not all she wrote. 1 month after Gretchen Harrington vanished, in September of 1975, this same 10-year-old girl wrote another entry. She had heard something. A classmate named Holly had been the target of an attempted kidnapping twice. The girl wrote down what she knew, and then she wrote what she suspected. The entry reads, and these are her exact words, written by a child in 1975. Guess what? A man tried to kidnap Holly twice. It's a secret, so I can't tell anyone, but I think he might be the one who kidnapped Gretchen. I think it was Mr. Z. Let that land for a moment. A 10-year-old girl, September 1975, 1 month after Gretchen disappeared. She knew. She could not prove it. She could not tell anyone. She said so herself, right there in her own words. It was a secret. She was a child in a community where this man was trusted, respected, ordained, where his word carried weight that hers never could. So she wrote it down, and she carried it for 47 years. In January of 2023, investigators from the Pennsylvania State Police sat down with this woman, now an adult, now decades removed from that neighborhood, from that house, from that summer. She had come forward after a book about the case was published, written by two authors with ties to the Marple Township community who had spent years researching Gretchen's story. She brought her diary. Investigators read the entry dated September 1975. They read what a 10-year-old girl had written about Mr. Z. They had their new lead. Two Pennsylvania State Police troopers, Corporal Andrew Martin and Trooper Eugene Trey, traveled to Marietta, Georgia on July 17, 2023. They met with David Zandstra, now 83 years old, now long retired, living in a lakefront home at Cobb County Police Headquarters. At first, he denied everything. Same as 1975, same as October 1975. Same story. He hadn't seen her, he didn't know anything. Then, the troopers placed CI No. 1's evidence in front of him. And something shifted. He admitted he had seen Gretchen walking on Lawrence Road that morning. He admitted he had been driving the green Rambler station wagon. He admitted he had offered her a ride. And then he told them what happened next. He drove her to a wooded area near the church. He parked the car. He told her to remove her clothing. She refused. She told him she wanted to go home. He struck her in the head with his fist. She began bleeding. He checked for a pulse. He believed she was dead. He covered her body with sticks and leaves. And then he drove back to the church, back to the congregation, back to the Harrington family, back to the community that trusted him. And he said nothing. Trooper Eugene Trey, who conducted the interview, was asked afterward whether Zandstra seemed remorseful. His answer was precise. "I don't know if he's sorry for what he did, but this is a weight off his shoulders, for sure." An arrest warrant was drawn up the same day. David Zandstra was taken into custody in Georgia. He was denied bail. He was extradited to Pennsylvania to face trial. 47 years after he had walked back into that church and pretended nothing had happened, he was finally going to answer for it. Or so the Harrington family believed.
On July the 24th, 2023, 47 years, 11 months, and 9 days after Gretchen Harrington walked out of her front door on Lawrence Road, the Delaware County District Attorney stood at a podium and made an announcement. David Zandstra had been charged with criminal homicide, first, second, and third-degree murder, kidnapping of a minor, possession of an instrument of crime. He had spent 18 months in custody by the time his trial began. The Harrington family released a statement. Gretchen's mother, Ina, still alive. Her 3 sisters, Zoe, Anne, and Jessica, still alive, still waiting. Their words were careful and they were measured, because they had learned over 47 years that hope is a fragile thing that has to be held gently. With today's announcement of an arrest, they wrote, "We are extremely hopeful that the person responsible for the heinous crime committed against our Gretchen will be held accountable. It's difficult to express the emotions that we are feeling as we take one step closer to justice. One step closer. Not there yet. One step closer." Now we come back to the detail from the beginning of this video, the one I asked you to hold. When investigators confronted Zandstra with the evidence from CI No. 1, with the diary, with the testimony of the woman who had written as a 10-year-old that she thought it was Mr. Z, something unlocked in him. He admitted he had been driving the green station wagon. He admitted he had stopped for Gretchen.
He admitted he had driven her to Ridley Creek State Park, and then he told police what had happened inside that car. He told her to remove her clothing. She refused. She told him she wanted to go home. She was, according to Zandstra's own account, terrified on that drive. He struck her in the head. She began to bleed. He believed she was dead. And then, he told police, he covered her body with sticks and leaves. He arranged her clothing in a neat pile beside her. He hung her underwear from a branch, like a flag. That is the answer. That is what investigators could not explain for 47 years and what Zandstra's own words finally revealed. It was not a signal meant to be found. It was not remorse. It was the act of a man performing a kind of order over what he had done, tidying the evidence of his own violence the way someone might straighten a room before leaving it. An 8-year-old girl. And he drove back to the church.
The trial of David Zandstra began in January of 2025. It lasted 4 days. The prosecution's case rested on the confession. Deputy District Attorney Jeff Payne laid it out with precision. Zandstra knew Gretchen. He had access to her. He had been on that road that morning, confirmed by multiple witnesses and by Zandstra's own admission, and he had described in precise detail clothing he should never have seen if he had not been with her. And in July of 2023, sitting across from 2 state police investigators, he had described how he had taken her life. Payne told the jury that during the confession, Zandstra had spoken about Gretchen being terrified in the car and asking to go home. He had recalled details freely, details that, Payne argued, only the person who was there could know. And then Payne said something that has stayed with me since I read it. He told the jury that Zandstra, during that 2023 interview, had said he was no longer attracted to little girls, not anymore, and that, like King David in the Bible, his namesake, he would confess and be forgiven. The defense told a different story. Mark Much, Zandstra's attorney, argued that the confession was not a confession at all. It was, he said, the product of coercion. Pennsylvania State Police investigators had lied to Zandstra during the interview. They had told him witnesses had seen his rambler approaching Gretchen when in fact no witness had made that specific identification. They had told him there were rocks found with blood on them, when in fact there was no blood on the rocks. These are interrogation tactics, legal in the United States, used routinely, but Much argued that in the case of an 83-year-old man who was at the time of the interview a stroke and cancer survivor, the tactics had produced not the truth, but a fabrication. If David Zandstra doesn't talk to the police, Much told the jury, we're not here. They didn't have any evidence to arrest him in 2023. He presented alternative suspects.
Richard Bailey, a convicted child rapist and kidnapper who had been seen a mile from where Gretchen disappeared on the day she vanished. Bailey died in state prison in the 1990s. And then he presented something far more disturbing, something that sent a quiet shock through the courtroom. Much told the jury that Gretchen's own sister, Zoe Harrington, had in 2021 confessed to killing Gretchen with a rock, describing what she called a bizarre occult-like ritual involving her father and members of his congregation. The prosecution moved quickly to counter it. Zoe Harrington, Payne told the jury, had a documented history of mental illness. Her confession was not credible. It was, Payne said, a distraction, a defense strategy designed to obscure the truth and overwhelm the jury with noise. Gretchen's other sister, Harriet Ann Myers, testified that Zoe had struggled with mental health for many years. The jury also heard about the DNA. There was no physical evidence linking Zandstra to Gretchen's clothing. DNA found on the garments belonged to 2 unidentified men and 1 unidentified woman. David Zandstra, the defense argued, was excluded as a potential contributor.
The prosecution's entire case rested on a confession that the defense called coerced from an elderly man with serious health conditions obtained using admitted deception with no physical evidence to support it. And so it came down, as these things so often do, to what 12 people in a room were willing to believe. On January the 17th, 2025, the jury in the trial of David Zandstra began deliberating. They deliberated for 1 hour. 1 hour. After a 4-day trial, after a 50-year investigation, after 47 years of a family waiting for a name, a courtroom, a reckoning, the jury took 60 minutes, and they returned a verdict of not guilty. Not guilty on all charges. David Zandstra, 84 years old, hugged his attorney as the verdict was read. His family, his wife Margie, his 3 daughters and their husbands had been waiting. They had rearranged their travel plans. They had prepared for a 2-week trial. It had ended in 4 days. His son-in-law said afterward that David had spent 550 days in jail, that the facility had not been equipped to care for someone his age, that the family was relieved to bring him home. His attorney released a statement. David Zandstra maintained his innocence for 48 years, it read. He maintains his innocence to this day. And then, quietly, the statement added, "Our hearts, along with all of Delaware County, still break for the Harrington family, who deserve an end to the nightmare of losing a family member." The Delaware County District Attorney's Office said they respected the verdict. They believed Zandstra had been the correct suspect. The case, they said, was now a closed investigation. The Harrington family said nothing publicly. There is nothing adequate to say. David Zandstra returned to his lakefront home in Marietta, Georgia. He died sometime later, in late 2025, surrounded, according to his attorney, by his loving family. His family has since filed a federal lawsuit against the 2 Pennsylvania State Police investigators who conducted his 2023 interview, alleging that they illegally coerced a confession from a stroke and cancer survivor. The lawsuit describes the prosecution as extreme and immoral. Gretchen Harrington's case is officially closed. Her killer, if the jury was wrong, will face no earthly consequence. Her killer, if the jury was right, has never been identified. Either way, she is still gone, and her family is still waiting. Not for an arrest anymore, not for a trial, not for a verdict, just for someone to finally tell them the truth. I want to tell you where things stand today, not because there is resolution to offer, there is not, but because Gretchen's story does not end with a verdict, and the people who loved her are still here, still living in the aftermath of a Friday morning in August that never should have ended the way it did.